Stephanie. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, Molly, thanks for having me.
Well, before we get into what you've discovered and what every realtor, buyer, seller, owner of property needs to know is going on right now, describe for me, please, the property that you are representing, that you're selling, and the work that you put into it. Let's start there.
Okay, this is a luxury estate. It is about 30 minutes outside of Boone, North Carolina. It's a small town, Purlear, Wilkes County, and it's 128 acres. The majority is wooded, but there is some pasture, but it's got a natural water source, creeks, springs, just under 8,000 square feet. So it is the epitome of beautiful, like one of a kind, all natural stone, a very unique property. And yeah, I think that because of all the features between just enough pasture, wooded, privacy, and then being all natural stone, people love the views and a water source. It's a top pick for most buyers.
I saw pictures, I saw the videos, they were amazing. And I just saw drone footage from up above. You can see the beautiful mountains and the views. How long does it take to do videos like that? How much money did you put into marketing this
Well,
house?
for me, I had to put more in because my home base is Tennessee, but I'm also licensed in North Carolina. But I didn't want to take a gamble on with a media crew that I didn't have any experience with, so I had to pay extra to bring my media crew that's just outside of Nashville. So yeah, just for their trip and time, out of the state, I think just under 4 grand, and that's just the media itself. That's not marketing the property.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. I have a lot of realtor friends, so I hear a lot about it. So I can only imagine what you felt when you found out that there was a negative score listed on this property. Tell us how you recognized it, where did you see it, and what did that negative score look like?
Well, it was devastating. Actually, my seller found it. I had no idea, and the reason we didn't have any ideas because it was new. This was in March of 2025 that we found it. Turns out that Zillow rolled this out on all the real estate, or not Zillow, rather First Street Foundation rolled this out in as soon as September 2024. But the initial response was, oh my gosh, we've got to get this off. I mean, this is wrong. The public trust these platforms. So he was very upset. I go into like there's a problem, we've got to solve it, and had no success at that point. Reached out to Zillow, tried to call, they didn't answer. If you're not a Zillow Premier agent, which I'm not, you don't they don't they'll just it just automatically hung up. It's like thank you for calling, and then so I said, well, I'll just email. So I emailed them saying if you do not get this off, there's going to be further recourse. Also tried First Street, and we can get into that, but you're not getting anywhere with them. So at this point felt stuck.
Right. Well, let's talk about what is the FEMA designation for this house versus what First
Right.
Street was showing through the Zillow and the rest of the websites.
Yeah, and that was what was so appalling is that FEMA listed as a minimal flood risk, and that's a zone X. Basically, that it's not in the flood zone. And although the property is extravagant, it has springs and some creeks on it, it is not in recognized as a FEMA floodplain. So there's no risk. So when you see that kind of data displayed to the public, citing that it's a severe flood risk, that's alarming, and it makes you angry. Yeah.
And what did you told me that there was a map that showed a river,
Yeah, it showed
a
water
river like many, many years into the future, a river going through
running
this
through
house.
his house. Sure did. Yep.
And what was the score that it gave them?
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10
Severe
flood
flood risk. Yep.
flood risk,
Yep.
which is opposite what FEMA says,
Yep.
which is a brand new score that's just
Yep.
started showing up in the past year or so
Yep.
on these listing sites.
That's right.
And you can't get it off. You called to try to reduce it, remove it, and you couldn't get it off.
No success initially.
So, have you been looking into First Street and like who they are and where they get their scores from and what their modeling is?
I did. It's all future projections, which is a joke. I mean, if we all had a crystal ball, but it's not based on historical data, which is what FEMA uses. I did start my own little investigation of, because my first thought is there's something really hokey going on here, and saw that some of their trusted advisors are mentioned on World Economic Forum site, which is basically, and then also through the research with Zillow, seeing that some of their largest shareholders were BlackRock and Vanguard. So just through my own little research, I thought, yeah, there's something fishy going on here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was looking at First Street, which is the source of the climate score that Zillow and these other companies are using. And it shows they give this explanation that FEMA flood maps identify only 1.1 million miles of flood hazardous areas. But they, in their risk factors, now have found flood models showing it's more widespread than FEMA actually thinks, that it's 26 million properties at risk over the next 30 years, given their future considers like sea level rise and climate change and things like that. And I was looking, also at the front page of First Street, it shows like all of these different articles down below, and it's really an alarmist website is what it is, with all kinds of press coverage. And I saw one article like from CNN, flood risk is growing for US homeowners due to climate change, and current insurance rates greatly underestimate the threat. And that got me very angry, Stephanie, because I know insurance rates just keep going up regardless of whether there's a threat or there's not a threat. So now here is this financial organization that's privately owned that we can't go after, that Zillow and these guys are pulling climate scores from that you can't dispute, and we'll talk about that in a second. But they're now that it's like they're telling the insurance companies that they're not charging enough because the risk isn't what they think it is, that it's higher than what they think it is. And that makes me angry. What do you think about that?
Angry every day, every day. I mean, I'm still being plagued by this. And the sad part is, like what you mentioned, this is about education and also wanting accountability. They need to quit, but also how many agents and brokers are unaware that this is even taking place and may not even understand why their seller's property that should, for all other reasons, be selling with no problem, that they could have this environmental risk attached to it.
Yeah. So there's this false climate score that's being put on houses. Now, so you went to dispute. So what happened when you tried to dispute with the different organizations?
So I reached, as I said, I tried to call, and Zillow wouldn't, they wouldn't talk to you by phone unless you're a Zillow Premier agent, which I'm not, and won't be. I don't pay for leads. So the next option was email them. And I got just a quick email back that said you've been entered in the queue. So at that point, it's like, that's not okay. That's not good enough. I need to talk to somebody. And then went and moved on to First Street, and tried to look up for a phone number, and they don't have one, which I think is by design, because I know people are probably losing their minds over this trying to call. So they don't have it where you can call them. Then proceeded to find their email and emailed, but later discovered, after reading outside of my initial panic, that they will ignore your email if you're disputing their climate risk assessment, that you've got to go and jump through all of these hoops in order to get them to respond. And so I was at a dead end at that point.
Yeah, I looked up First Street dispute policy, and I thought it was pretty shocking because it says we don't update factor scores based on individual request or disputes. So if you contact customer support, even though they're not going to give you a phone number, as you said, Stephanie, if you somehow figure out a way to get in touch with them regarding a score dispute, you should not expect a personalized response.
Yep.
That is
It's outrageous.
outrageous.
Yep.
And then it says, unless you can provide a FEMA LOMA letter. And I was like, okay, what's a FEMA LOMA letter? Because I'm not a realtor, right? Well, that's a letter of map amendment to correct a FEMA map. So that would make sense if FEMA had the wrong score, because FEMA actually is reasonable and does allow you to make corrections if you go to them. And they say that if you go to FEMA because you think your property is incorrectly identified in a hazard area and we make a change, then give that to your insurance company and they'll probably get rid of your flood insurance costs. It's going to reduce your insurance costs. But if FEMA is the one that's saying that you're not in a flood zone, that you're perfectly fine, that there is no danger here, then there would not be a FEMA LOMA letter to give to First Street. So it doesn't even, they're basically saying you have no options.
Yeah.
You have no options.
Which is stressful too, especially if they don't have a Stephanie in their corner for somebody that's trying to battle this. But my thoughts were, and I told my seller, Well, me as a broker and agents, we can lose our license over putting incorrect information out to the public. It's a consumer protection issue,
Right.
and we have to stay compliant, with our advertising and such. But the largest real estate platforms can do whatever they want. They don't have to do due diligence to make sure, hey, we should probably fact check and make sure this isn't in the FEMA floodplain before we put and cite that this is a 9 out of 10 flood risk.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't held to that same standards and accountability as we are.
Right.
So
And
yeah.
we're going to get into, who owns those listing sites. But first, I want to tell you, I looked up First Street Technology. It's a privately held public benefit corporation, not regulated as a federal authority like FEMA, not subject to the same statutory authority as FEMA. So this is just saying right there, they can't be held accountable because it's a private company. But we're exposing this, Stephanie, so that's not going to last for long. So, but I want to find out also just what happens in the sales process. So as soon as, buyers start to see this extra climate scare score come up on the website, what happens when they see a 9 out of 10 flood risk? What happens psychologically? What happens to negotiations, time on the market, all that?
Yeah, that's if you even get, most of the time it's dead in the water. You're not even going to get to negotiations. I found an article that Zillow did a study, and 86% of the public indicated that they liked the environmental risk, and that was helpful in purchasing a home. Okay, so if you know that, and that's 86% is pretty high, that they appreciate having that data shared, and that makes a difference in their decision on a purchase. It's damaging. So to answer your question, you're not going to even get to negotiations. We had canceled showings, and at the time we didn't know that it was on there. So I didn't think to at that point where I could say, hey, let me ask you this, or is this what you read impacting your decision to now to come see the property? You don't really press people too much, and chase them down if they change their mind. At that point, if they say they're going a different direction, you let them go. But I absolutely believe that different direction was because of what they saw. And of course, buyer interest dropped off at that point, and canceled showings. So again, to answer your question, there is no, you don't even make it to negotiations. Most people are going to scroll on. They're already, no way do I want to have a flood risk or a fire risk, nor do I want to pay fire or flood insurance on top of that. So you don't even probably get that conversation at that point. They've shut you out.
Right. These scores are manipulating the market so that buyers say, I don't want to buy this house. So then the price is going to go down on this house. They're going to lose a lot of value here. And when no families want to purchase this house, then that leaves it for corporations to buy. And corporations should not be buying the house because, as we all know, President Trump at the beginning of this year had an executive order saying that Wall Street should not be buying these houses, these private family homes. But I think they're trying to get around that. And so let's look at Zillow and Land and Realtor and these companies. I looked them up. I wanted to see who owns them because, Stephanie, in my experience, it's been that as soon as one of these companies starts acting woke, like we saw Cracker Barrel last year, start acting woke, like what? Who might be pulling the strings behind this company? I look at the ownership, and turns out that the big three institutional investors, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, as you mentioned, actually own collectively more than 15 to 22% of each of those listing companies. So Zillow is public on its own. They own them. Then Homes.com and Land.com are owned by CoStar. CoStar is the parent company that is owned. Its shareholder shares are owned 15 to 22% by the big three. And then Realtor.com's parent company is News Corp, and they are also owned. Majority of the shares are 15 to 20% BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. And the reason that matters is because when you have that much investment in these public companies, you have significant proxy voting influence.
That's right.
And BlackRock's proxy voting guidelines pressure companies to adopt these net zero emission targets that the U.S. does not require by law. President Trump has pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord twice and since pulled us out of many different international agreements based on the whole net zero scam. So America isn't supposed to be going by these net zero rules anymore. But when BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard own your shares and they can tell the board of directors how much you're going to get paid if you don't follow their rules, then that makes a very big difference. And so, Stephanie, just it hits me pretty hard because I'm here in Texas and we've been coming up against this a lot since 2021. If anyone looks at our sister's website, American Energy Institute, they put out a report, Jason Isaac did, about BlackRock's hidden boycott on oil, gas, and cattle and how it continues. They've been trying to pretend that they no longer are, pro net zero, but they are. They're trying to pretend like they're not going after our energy industry and trying to shut us down, but they still are. And it shows a lot of that. But I just want to read you a couple of quick bullet points from this report, because if you just put real estate in there, you're like, oh, it's the exact same playbook, Stephanie. Okay. BlackRock specifically still maintains proxy voting guidelines that pressure companies to adopt net zero emission targets not required by law. They oppose directors for failing to adopt those standards. And they are still under litigation by our Texas Attorney General for alleged collusion to restrict fossil fuel output. So Texas knows that BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard are trying to shut down many different industries. Now we're going to need to add real estate to that. So I'm just curious, knowing who you're up against, I don't know. Does it help to know who you're up against?
Like, yeah, that they see themselves as this big behemoth that no, they're untouchable, but you know, they'll come crumbling down. But it's going to take exposure, and it's going to take hitting them where it hurts, and that's financially. But it first starts with the exposure.
Absolutely.
Because there's, for those that aren't aware, there's definitely going to be an outrage, just like what we've experienced. It's not right. This comes down to, ultimately, like we talked about, a land grab. This is still part of their agenda, that you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So,
Right.
and I experienced that with that call right after, I told you before, that triggered, really kind of put me on guard when I complained to Zillow, and then I had interest from a nonprofit, which I'm sure was funded by a big corporation, and then I was able to see that they had their 17 sustainable development goals on the bottom, and I thought, well, okay, that figures. That's what's going on here. Because like you said before, that's what the goal is that to keep it on the market for these extended periods of time, because you can't sell it. So not only has buyer perception been impacted because of the incorrect data that scares people, then because of that, it sits on the market longer. So now on my seller's property, which we had a lot of interest until, first the hurricane hit, Hurricane Helene, and like I told you before, that he didn't have any damage from that, but the whole state had a stigma on it. But then come right behind it, and they came right on the heels of that, and rolled out this first street on these platforms to say that he was a 9 out of 10 flood risk. Imagine that, when there's already that fear. So, but now what we're up against is coming up in May on 2 years unnecessarily on the market. Okay, which also affects buyer perception, because people then say, okay, we get rid of the data. It's already been impacted, because now they're like, well, what's wrong with it? It's been on the market for almost 2 years. There's got to be something wrong with it. And any agent will tell you that. The longer the time that it sits on the market, the more difficult it is to sell, because they think something's wrong with it. So we were impacted on the front end. We're still being impacted right now. And as you were able to, and I shared with you that land.com is now participating in this, which is a paid platform that I spend money on. And they have him as a 9 out of 10 because of First Street. So it's like I slap one and smack one and get, we get a little bit of action from them. They're still doing what they do.
Did land.com respond to you?
I'm going to reach out to them today, because remember, I just found out over the
Oh,
weekend.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, they're next. We'll see. We'll see if they're easier. I pay, so they're, at this point I have contracts with them, but they're going to be in big trouble with me if, this is a paid platform, whereas Zillow and those are populated over. There's no cost to put your listings there.
Right. Right.
So let's just say I better have, success with them getting to take it off.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're paying for land, but remember, their parent company is CoStar, and CoStar is also has Blackstreet, Vanguard,
Yeah,
State,
I know it's an uphill battle.
all
It
these
really
guys
is.
own
One
them.
that one that we shouldn't be fighting.
I know. Okay, so regulatory solutions, really quick. What's going on? Is Congress involved? Are the two state legislatures involved? Are you getting any help as far as that's concerned? And then also even the Realtor Association, now National Realtor Association. What's going on with these groups as far as acknowledging the problem and helping?
Well, Okay, just I've started to try. I've had meetings where I've tried to get with my congressman and senator, but they're very busy, and I have actually even traveled to DC, and they've been pulled away for briefings, which I understand. That's part of it. So still actively working on that. I That would get me on a whole different path on my thoughts on NAR, which is National Association of Realtors. They're part of this whole woke game too. So yeah, I'll name them, and if we have a to be continued, because if you look, they use RPR, and you'll find that their involvement is deeply entrenched in this as well. So they're not on our side.
Okay. All right. Well, what can we do to help? Obviously, this video I want to be shared far and wide because I want every realtor to understand what's going on with their listings and share with their sellers and their buyer exactly what's going on, because this is a climate scam. It is meant to devalue private property. Clearly, it's not going with the truth. FEMA is who we need to be following right now, and that is the correct score. If you've got a property in North Carolina and Hurricane Helene came in and they did not get damaged, and they still have a no risk flood score by FEMA after Hurricane Helene, that's saying a lot for a property that's in North Carolina, okay? And then the fact that First Street won't allow anybody to dispute it, they're not going to make any changes, and they're just this privately held company that's really doesn't seem to be accountable to anybody. Well, we're going to see about that. We're going to get this information out there. But just final thoughts, Stephanie, what can we do to help? What can our listeners do to help? And we're going to have you back on because we're going to continue to share the story about what's going on here, because private property ownership is an American right, and it is the one way that many families actually own and grow their wealth. It's for generational wealth. We want to keep it going, and our founding fathers fought for us to have private property, and we're going to continue to fight for it. And don't feel bad, because this is America, and all we need to do is expose it, and we will stop it. But your final words, Stephanie, what else can we do to help you?
Well, we've covered it really well, Molly. It's all about education, and this getting out as to many as possible and sharing, and even brokers having meetings to share this with their agents so that they can be educated, because as I said, most are not aware. So first starts with education, and then coming after them. We've got to we've got to speak out against it.
Oh, we're going to stop this. We are going to stop this. And I'm sorry you're going through it, but thank you for being so brave to share everything. If people want to talk with you about what you found out, what steps you've taken so they don't have to recreate the wheel and continue to work together to move forward, is there a website or an email address that you want to share that people could just reach out to you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to them if they want to share what they're experiencing. They can reach out to me at Stephanie at TennesseeRealProperties.com. It's pretty long, and I'd be happy to talk to them by phone if they wanted. My number's 931-248-6785.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie, so much for all you're doing. Keep up the good fight, sister, and God bless you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Molly.
Thank you.
Bye.